Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Fetal Position, episode number 11. I am your host, Elijah, and today we're going to be discussing whether or not the unborn is a biological human being. So, right off the bat, I want to potentially apologize for the echo that you hear in the background. If you do hear it, then, like I said, I apologize. But if you don't, great. You see, before now, I had an air conditioner in our loft attic space area where I could go up and I could record the podcast while the children were sleeping. However, because we keep Micah's, he's a 2-year-old, we keep his door shut for a good amount of the time while we're getting stuff done after he goes to bed. It gets to be like 95 degrees in his room because we don't have central air conditioning, and it's very warm. And I know how I feel when I get very warm, and I'm frustrated. And sometimes when he goes down for a nap, he wakes up and he's all sweaty. So I decided to take the air conditioner away from the podcast recording space because we don't actually use that space all that much other than to store stuff. And I moved it into Micah's room. And the result is that either I go upstairs and sweat a lot while recording this podcast, which I would rather not do, or I go out and buy another air conditioner, or I go and find a new spot. So today I'm trying out the garage, see if that works. It's actually delightfully cool in here, but if it's too echoey, which I'll figure that out when I upload it, then I'll probably try something else, maybe the basement, or maybe I might just grin and bear it and sweat all the entire time I'm recording the podcast. I don't know, we'll see. But that's the reason for the echo. Before diving into the main topic, which is whether or not the unborn is a biological human being, I want to talk a little bit about some current events that are going on now regarding the Democrat National Convention, Hillary Clinton, and Planned Parenthood, and all this other good stuff. So if you have been following it at all, Cecile Richards, which is the CEO of Planned Parenthood, she said that, well, here, I'm just going to read it from an interview that she had with the Texas Observer. The interview asks, "And your proudest moment at Planned Parenthood?" And then Cecile says, Cecile, did I call her Cecile earlier? Cecile Richards? Either way. Ms. Richards says, "Definitely the day President Obama called to say that he was about to announce that birth control would be covered for all women under their insurance plans because it had been a hard-fought battle long before I came to Planned Parenthood. We were fighting to make sure that insurance companies covered it and pharmacies would fill prescriptions. The fact that now, I believe, for your generation, all women will be able to get it without a fight. They'll be able to get the best birth control is an enormously important moment. It was a win for the movement." Now, what she's referring to is this HHS mandate, which required Christian organizations and businesses to have to challenge all the way up to the Supreme Court. It was basically she wanted to force religious employers, including nuns and people within the Catholic Church, to pay for abortion-causing drugs in employee health plans through the HHS. Obviously, this isn't a political podcast, even though I seem to be talking a little bit more about politics lately, because it's what's going on now. But this is a pretty big assault on the religious liberty clause, the right that we have to religious liberty here in this country. Because if we cannot say, no, I will not pay for someone to kill their child, it is against my religion or against my conscience to pay for this sort of thing. If we can't say no to that, what else are we going to have to be able to do and have no protection from it? The whole point of the existence of this country in religious liberties from a religious liberties perspective is that everyone should be able to practice their religion with, as long as they're not impeding on anyone else, as long as they're not doing anything bad to anybody else. But no, now it's the new, with what I'm going to talk about in a second. The new Democrat National Convention, Hillary Clinton's new platform, is no longer what people are calling pro-choice, although she continues to use that label. She is much more pro-abortion than anything else. She has removed, you know how it used to be safe, legal, and rare? She's removed the whole rare idea behind it, because when you would say that abortion should be safe, legal, and rare, saying that it's rare meant that it had some kind of a moral component, but they're just going to shirk that altogether, because who cares if it's got a moral component or not? We're just going to say it doesn't, and we're going to embrace the idea that it should be safe and legal. And so they're putting it on par with virtually every other medical procedure, even though this one, in every single successful medical procedure in this category, ends up killing a human being. So it seems reasonable for us to say that it's on a different category, but they don't want to talk about it like that. So Mrs. Richards' greatest, most proud moment of being the boss of Planned Parenthood was that she is now allowed to now violate everyone's religious liberty and have them pay for something that violates their religious convictions. So, great job, you. On top of that, the Hillary Clinton, so now I'm going to move formally over into that category. Hillary Clinton, the Democrat National Convention is going on. It happened tonight. And the one main thing that not main thing, there were a bunch of things that she talked about, but one of the things as related to this podcast was that she talked about overturning the Hyde Amendment and forcing taxpayer funding of abortions. Again, this is one of those things that just shows that she's not pro-choice. She wants everyone to pay for abortions through their taxpayer money. Now, I know I have some Democrat or progressive listeners, and this might be a little bit of a shot against that whole movement, but that's okay. I'm not trying to alienate it, but this is how it works. So the progressive side of the political movement tends to embrace the idea that they are tolerant, but they're not tolerant in the fact that they are accepting of other people's views. They accept other people's views as long as it agrees with them and helps them promote their perspective. If it gets in the way at all, then it's punished by increasing tax burdens and all this other stuff. It's tolerance as long as you're not in my way. In this perspective, in this situation, Hillary Clinton is doing that exact thing. She is making it so that she's not tolerant of the pro-life perspective. She could say, well, if you don't like abortion, don't get one. That's not what she's saying anymore. She's completely getting rid of that, and she's saying, if you don't like abortion, tough, you're paying for it anyway, which makes me sick, because the Hyde Amendment exists so that we don't have to do that. We don't have to say, or so we can say, well, okay, abortion exists, but at least I'm not paying for it. Meh, get rid of that. That's stupid. Because now women are apparently they're going to have a positive right to abortion, where if anyone gets in the way at all, they're violating their positive rights, which I'm going to get into positive and negative rights at some point in the future. But I think we have to fight against the idea that even the pro-life Democrats, you guys need to fight against the idea that people should be forced to violate their conscience and be forced to pay for someone else's abortion. Now, for me, it's easy. I can just say, no, taxpayer money goes to anything. But, in the moment, I'm going to fight for the idea that taxpayer money, if it's going to go towards something, it cannot go to something that violates people's conscience. The Hyde Amendment should stay in existence. And unfortunately, I don't see a ton of people arguing this way, and Usually it's they don't really understand what the Hyde Amendment is. Just very briefly, the Hyde Amendment is, like I was saying earlier, is an amendment that restricts taxpayer money on abortion. And if they do away with the Hyde Amendment, the federal money will be available under Medicaid to be used for abortions. We don't want the Hyde Amendment to be repealed. In addition to that, the Democrats on this issue want every healthcare provider to say that they either provide abortions or they have to give the name of someone who does provide abortions, and they're not allowed to give any sort of ethical objections or keep your morality at the door, because it is illegal for you to prevent a woman from getting an abortion. It's interesting that the Democrat National Party decided that they wanted to adopt this perspective, given that this platform comes out on the same day as a new poll conducted by Marist University finds Americans oppose taxpayer funding of abortions. To quote the study, or the poll says, the majority of Americans in favor of abortion restrictions has been consistently around 8 in 10 for the better part of a decade. Though self-identification as pro-life or pro-choice can vary substantially from year to year, the support for restriction is quite stable. I'm going to read directly from lifenews.com right now. It says, Students for Life of America President Kristen Hawkins told lifenews.com that the DNC platform is the most pro-abortion in history, supporting taxpayer-funded abortions and Planned Parenthood by name. She said the radical pro-abortion platform will turn off most pro-life younger voters. This is a quote from her. The Democrats are almost comically out of touch with millennials when it comes to abortion. It's the sole issue where the younger generation splits with the party of the most pro-abortion nominee in history. This generation grew up with the technology that unambiguously showed the development of life in the womb and isn't fooled by any attempts to dumb down abortion by the promotion of celebrities like Lena Dunham or Miley Cyrus and her ridiculous T-shirt campaign. Millennials are the largest age group that supports a ban on abortion after 20 weeks. Only 17% agree with Hillary Clinton's radical abortion position that dictates abortion should be legal throughout all 9 months of pregnancy for any reason. And 84% believe abortion facilities should be held to the same medical standards as other outpatient facilities. Democrats shouldn't be surprised when the millennials switch channels as the presidents of Planned Parenthood and NARAL promote a pro-abortion agenda at their convention this week, or when some celebrity pushes the lie that women are awesome but can't possibly continue their education or hold down a job and raise their child. Millennials aren't going to be fooled by the nonsense spewed on abortion this week in Philadelphia. There's a lot more that could be said on that, but I just want, in case you guys didn't notice this whole thing going on, the Democrats have adopted a significant pro-abortion status, no longer pro-choice. The Libertarians now have Johnson, which, from what I understand, is personally pro-life, but he thinks that a proper understanding of the libertarian perspective, which you can argue that he doesn't actually understand that, but he says that women should have the right to choose, but he wants to get rid of any federal involvement whatsoever. So while he may agree ultimately with the women's right to choose from the government's perspective with Hillary Clinton and stuff, his proposal or his approach to it is very different, because he wants to get rid of all taxpayer money on that topic altogether, whereas Hillary Clinton wants to take it right out of your paycheck. And then Donald Trump, I had to look more into Donald Trump's position. He used to be pro-choice, and now he says he's pro-life. He doesn't seem to care about it. I hear almost nothing ever talking about it, but that's only because he only cares about building a wall and promoting nationalism. Needless to say, I think I'm with everyone, the vast majority of people on this issue, where I don't like anyone who's running for president. There was a good episode. Jeremy Lundmark did a good episode about the various positions on abortion from the candidates that were running, and I'll put a link to that in the show notes. I'll have to remember which episode that was. But either way, yeah, I'll toss a link to that in the show notes. Once the election is closer, I want to analyze specifically what the the people are saying on the topic of abortion, and probably a couple of the other topics around that as well, like taxpayer funding, defunding Planned Parenthood, or funding Planned Parenthood, even though they're making like millions and millions of dollars in profit a year. They don't need federal funding. But I digress. But yeah, eventually I'm going to talk about that stuff as the election gets a little bit closer. And now I want to jump into the main topic of discussion today, and that is whether or not the unborn is a biological human being. To transition into that, we have some transition metal. Fetal Position Podcast. Fetal Position Podcast. Okay. Yeah, that was fun. I should work something in there like, super heavy guitars, and I'm like, Fetal Position Podcast or something. Yeah. Okay. Thanks for tolerating that. So a little while ago, I wrote an article. I was approached by a friend named Richard Bushy. He runs a blog called ThereforeGodExists.com. And he approached me a little while ago and asked if I wanted to write an article for his site called, he didn't give me a name, but it was basically addressing the idea that the unborn is a biological human being. Now, for me, I have a degree in biology. I work in the biological field, and I'm doing pro-life activism, as much as this can be called activism. And it seems very strange to me whenever I hear someone say that the unborn isn't human. So strange that I don't even know where to really begin, other than to assume that maybe they mean that the unborn human being is actually just not an unborn human person. I pretty much default to assuming that, unless they really are adamant about the unborn being not a human being. But that's just patently absurd, and I hope that I will show that when I read this article here. I'll put the link in the show notes for that, but I'm going to go ahead and start reading that now. When I was younger, a group of friends and I were riding our bikes through the neighborhood. One of my friends was peering into the river as we rode by, and he shouted, "Ugh, ew, awesome, gross." And he immediately screeched to a halt and jumped off his bike. He was so excited that he didn't stand his bike on the kickstand. He eagerly grabbed his stick and ran towards the river. After exchanging confused and excited glances to each other, the rest of us followed our temporary leader down to the rocks, weeds, and mud to see what the excitement was all about. One of the younger kids in the group, Andy, decided that he didn't really want to go down there because he wasn't a fan of surprises or gross things. Guys, what is it?" he asked. "Shut up and come down here, Andy," responded one of the boys. "But what is it? Is it a fish?" There was no answer. "Guys, where'd you go?" There's silence. So Andy decides to go a little closer to the river. "Ah!" he screams as someone throws a mangled dead seagull over a bush into Andy's face. "That's not cool, guys. You suck. That smells bad. Ew." I tell the story that may or may not be entirely accurate, you know how memories are, in order to illustrate a point. When Andy asked, "What is it?" he was asking because he wanted to know how he ought to respond. If he was just a skeleton of a fish, he would have likely responded one way. But if it was the corpse of a recently drowned human being, he would have likely responded entirely differently. He may have enjoyed looking at the fish bones, and he may have run screaming if it was a recently deceased human corpse. Likewise, when we are discussing ethical issues like abortion, it is important for us to know what is actually happening. I recently posted a video on my Facebook wall of a developing fetus at 7 weeks. It was making no moral claims whatsoever. It was merely a description of what happens during fetal development at the time. A woman, a friend of a friend, commented and told me that the video was offensive, but I didn't understand how a morally neutral examination of a developing human being could possibly be offensive. After all, shouldn't we know what is being killed in the act of an abortion? I asked her to clarify what she was offended by, but she never responded. But I can understand the implications. If abortion kills a human being, it very quickly becomes a complex moral issue. So the crucial question imposes itself. Does abortion kill a human being? If you have spent any time at all engaging with pro-choice defenders, you've probably heard them deny that the unborn is human. You may have heard them suggest that we don't know when a quote-unquote fertilized egg becomes a human being. You may have even heard something like, quote, the embryo is no more human than a skin cell, unquote, as they scratch their arm and slough off millions of dead cells and expect you to mourn the deaths of millions of tiny humans. One of my favorite objections is when someone says that masturbation kills millions of humans, or that pro-lifers ought to mourn the loss of a human being every time a woman gets her period. In this post, I hope to put these nonsensical objections to rest. The fact of the matter is rather simple. It is something that we learn about in elementary school when our parents have the talk with us. When a mommy and daddy love each other very much, they engage in certain behaviors that end up creating a new baby brother. Now, I'm not entirely sure where the pro-choicer's parent went wrong when discussing where babies come from with their grossed-out prepubescent son or daughter. Perhaps the conversation was so uncomfortable that they just told the kid that the stork brings the baby to mommy at the hospital. In case you still believe the stork theory of human reproduction, let me just inform you right now. Spoilers, storks have nothing to do with human procreation. A new child is created by the union of a sperm cell from daddy and an egg cell from mommy. The sperm enters the egg, its outer layer disintegrates, and then the DNA from both cells combine together to make a new unique genetic combination within the egg cell. At this point, the fertilized egg, quote-unquote fertilized egg, or the zygote emerges. The zygote is the first stage of human development. At this stage, the zygotic cell begins to divide by mitosis and will continue to grow into a more developed human organism. And this is apparently a point of contention. When conception is completed, that is the point at which a new human being comes into existence. This new human being has all the features of a living organism. She has a separate DNA from her mother, metabolism, goal-oriented development, replication, interaction with the world outside, etc. Her life began at this point, and she will continue to develop long after this point. If a pro-choice advocate claims that a zygote isn't a human, they have a fundamental confusion surrounding the basic biology of human reproduction. It is important to note that many people make a distinction between zygote and baby, as if this distinction proves something. Unfortunately, it proves nothing except for their misunderstanding of how scientists label different stages of human development. Many different animals have stages that we, as a human race, have given labels. A chicken, a frog, a human, and an elephant all go through embryonic stages. However, this does not mean that they are merely an embryo. An elephant mommy and daddy make an elephant embryo. A chicken mommy and daddy make a chicken embryo. A human mommy and daddy make a human embryo that develops into a human fetus that develops into a human infant that develops into a human toddler, and so on and so forth. The common thread throughout human development is rather simple. It is a human being. This is human development. There is no way for you to divorce the concept of embryo from the kind of embryo that it is. Ignoring the adjective human doesn't make the human embryo any less human. If you are interested in learning more about human development in the womb, here's a great summary of what happens. I put a link in the blog post. Contrary to what some people claim, there is no debate as to when the human being begins. Former Planned Parenthood President Dr. Alan Guttmacher wrote a book called Life in the Making in 1933. In this book, referencing the fact that the zygote is the beginning of a human life, he says, quote, all this seems so simple and evident that it is difficult to picture a time when it wasn't part of the common knowledge, unquote. This was in 1933. There is no disagreement among experts in this area, and I mean literally none. There isn't even some random fringe dude with an honorary master's degree from my backyard university who denies this basic fact of biology. If you want a full, comprehensive list of 40 quotes from medical textbooks to show this consensus, go no further. I've provided the link in this blog post. If you still do not believe that a human being's life begins at conception, you are denying basic biological facts. You really ought to rethink your intellectual integrity, because there's no justification whatsoever for the anti-scientific and anti-intellectual view that a human being's life begins sometime other than conception. All right, so let's suppose that we could ignore universal expert scientific consensus. Let's ignore facts about reality that we've been known about for hundreds, if not thousands of years. Let's ignore all of that and appeal to ignorance. Perhaps we really don't know when human life begins. In that case, wouldn't the most responsible thing for us to do is to not kill them? Let's imagine a situation where we have the option to destroy a building. We're on a demolition team and this building has been scheduled to be imploded. You're just about to push the doomsday button and someone asks you, hey, are there any humans in there? And you realize that you're actually not sure. You, being the responsible demolition man that you are, have no choice. You have to blow up the building anyway. No, of course not. If we are ignorant of whether or not there is a human being in the building, we have a moral obligation to avoid blowing up the building until we know for sure that there are no human beings in there. So, even if we appeal to anti-scientific sentiments like ignorance about when human life begins, that still does not justify abortion in any way. So wait, what's the difference between an abortion and a period, or masturbation, or scratching off skin cells? The answer is simple. Gametes, which are sperm and egg cells, and somatic cells, which are skin cells, or skin cells are an example of a somatic cell, are done developing. Gametes, when left alone, continue to be gametes until they die. A somatic cell will also continue to be a skin cell until it dies. When you leave a zygote alone, in its normal environment, it will continue to develop into a more complex human organism. There's a very, very important difference between a gametic and a somatic cell and a developing human organism. I really hope you can see that. And I hope this post helps in basic scientific literacy as well as promotion of the pro-life perspective. When we ask the most important question, what does abortion do? We have to answer it with, abortion ends the life of a defenseless, innocent human being. There is no way around this. Okay, I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you enjoyed my comments about the DNC and Hillary Clinton and Planned Parenthood and Cecile Richards and all them. My goal is to bring the episodes down in length because the last 3 episodes have been way too long. I mean, I know that it was an appropriate length given the topic, given that I was talking about bodily autonomy and that I was talking about the violinist, and then I had been off for a month, and I wanted to talk about aborted fetal tissue and cells used in scientific research, and then I want to talk about vaccines. That required a lot of backstory and some history. I'll eventually be peppering in some more of that stuff in the future. The vaccine thing, I think I wanted to read something that I wrote about it titled, "It Doesn't Matter If Vaccines Cause Autism, Vaccinate Your Child Anyway." I'll put that in the show notes. I'll probably read that at some point too, maybe on episode 15. It's kind of like a bonus content. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to contact me on Twitter or on the Facebook group. We have a private Facebook group. If you go to thefetalposition.com/Facebook, you can join our private Facebook group. You can follow me on Twitter at fetal_position. I have the show notes for this episode because it's going to be episode 11. Will be thefetalposition.com/11. There's not going to be a ton of the show notes in there today. But there will be some valuable links like the article that I read. And that's it. I would appreciate if you guys can share the show. I'm doing my best to use my limited marketing experience, limited marketing knowledge to promote the podcast. I don't have a ton of ability to do that at the moment because I've been... I have a lot of other stuff that's currently happening, but I have big plans for this podcast. I would love to be able to do more than 1 episode a week. I don't know if that's going to be possible anytime soon. But hey, who knows? You never know. Dream big, right? 2 episodes a week. Big dreams. No, but seriously, I have some big thoughts and some cool places that I want to take this show. So hopefully you guys can help me out in that. That'd be awesome. So if you can rate and review, share the show, do all that good stuff that good podcast listeners do that I fail so often at doing from podcasts that I like. What is this, like, do as I say, not as I do? Yeah, anyway, so I'm going to hit the music and let you guys go. Have a great day. See you next week.